Welcome back to a North Carolina Tar Heels football podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on our very fast-growing YouTube channel that recently hit 14,000, so now the Jacob Turner push for 15,000. By the way, I told Jacob we're going to get to 16,000 before fall practice begins in early August. So here's a little thing for you. Whoever you think is right, Jacob at 15, me at 16, go ahead and send us a DM on Twitter at Heel Illustrated and tell us what you think the number will be when fall camp begins August 2nd, August 3rd, and whoever's closest to getting it right will get 6 free months at Tar Heel Illustrated. And if you didn't know, I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and if you didn't know, he's THI staff writer Brandon Peay. We were at the spring event more than spring game on Saturday. We've been at multiple other practices as well. We've had our sleeves rolled up covering spring football for the last 5+ weeks. So we're here to discuss, now that spring football is over, what we learned, share some thoughts, have a general discussion about the offense for the Tar Heels. So Brandon, I think Saturday's cool. This is going to be a good discussion. We've talked nothing about this, by the way.
Yeah.
This is all virgin territory here. This is all green, wet behind the ears, everything else.
Yeah.
So Brandon was on the field Saturday shooting, and I'm in the press box. So we had different vantage points. So I think that'll make for an interesting conversation. So Brandon, the first thing that jumped out at you Saturday for the offense outside of Drake May was
the amount of times that they ran the ball. I think me and Jacob we were on the field. We're talking about this. They were running the ball a lot. I think that's the main thing that stood out to me. And I think this year they're going to be more dedicated to the run, and I think that's going to be a good thing because we saw last year when they weren't dedicated to the run and they were forcing Drake May to pass the ball so much, it got predictable and it became easier to stop. So I think that's a good thing. I think because Jacob was saying, like, why aren't they throwing the ball? And I was like, I don't think they need to practice throwing the ball much. I think they got that down pretty well. So I like the fact they were running the ball. I also like the fact that British Brooks was back, no knee brace. He looked good. I got a really good picture of him running someone over. It's very impressive. So those are like the main things that stood out to me. What stood out to you?
Well,
we haven't talked about this.
No, this is all brand new for us. I think the running. I'll just comment on whatever you say. The running for sure, and running between the tackles. There weren't a bunch of, if toss sweeps, or they didn't run wide that much. It was a lot of running between the tackles. But one thing people need to understand and remember, that the spring game wasn't about scheme. It was about personnel, engaging personnel. So one of the things they are committed to, which you can gauge by the running a lot, is they have put an absolute premium on running the ball better between the tackles and running the ball downhill. They understand that they must be able to win games, as Max says, if Drake has an off day. You can't rely on him to win. And I think part of this, to be perfectly honest with you, not just because the really good teams can run in the red zone, they can run in tight situations, and they have that element anyway. But if you can run the ball well, you can avoid the 3rd and longs when defenses pin their ears back. So many of their sacks they gave up last year were on 3rd down. The other thing is, if something happens to Drake, if you still have the running game that you can go to, you might be able to get by. Because I don't think there's a tremendous amount of confidence yet in the backup quarterback situation. Now, the game plan to run the ball a lot and run the ball better between the tackles had nothing to do with that, because that's the decision they made when Chip Lindsey was hired in December. But I think a byproduct of it is, hey, if something happens to Drake, we still need to be able to move the chains. We still need to be able to find ways to get points on the board. And if you can consistently run the ball well, even with an inexperienced quarterback that you're not going to do too much with, you should still have some success in that area.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I don't think they quite ran the ball well yesterday. It was a lot of it. There was a lot of unsolved. I like to call them unsolved plays, where it was like, so and so would have made the tackle at the line of scrimmage. And you're like, well, we don't know what would have happened. So it was a lot of those unsolved plays yesterday. So I was really interested to see like what would have happened if they were going full speed and able to take each other to the ground.
Yeah, they were in thud the whole time. Originally, they decided Saturday morning to do some thud because they wanted some of the guys that they're going to count on that are in yellow jerseys, Geo Biggers and Will Hardy and some of those guys, to have basically full speed without full contact because they needed the reps. And British Brooks was one of those guys, but he wasn't wearing yellow. And then Mac decided just to keep it in thud the whole time because Brooks needed a lot more reps. So the plan was, okay, here's the script. We do thud for that portion, and then it's full for the other. British look good enough. They want to keep giving him reps. You want to see how the knee responds, how he responds. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they stayed in thud. And because of that, one of the other points of Memphis this spring with the run game, Brandon, has been tackles after contact, breaking tackles. They didn't have a lot of that the last couple of years. That was one of the things that made Javonte Williams and Michael Carter so outstanding, was the yards after contact. That hasn't been a strength the last 2 years. And they're trying to get that back into the realm of strength again. I think Omarion Hampton has a ton of potential for that. Yeah. And I think Elijah Green, because he's shifty and he runs low and he's strong running low, I think he has a chance to be a guy that can get yards after contact too. So when they're going in thud and guys can get wrapped up and brought to the ground, we don't know how many times, as you said, those hit at the line of scrimmage would have been a tackle or would have been a broken tackle. So we're at like 75% gauging a lot of the stuff that we saw. But one of the truths there, though, is, Brandon, there was a lot of contact at the point of attack. Yeah. There was tremendous gap discipline by the guys up front on defense. And as a result, the gaps were filled. Like the offensive line had a tough time, not only in pass protection, but I thought in run blocking yesterday. Now, is that because the defense is that much better? Or is that because the offense is still trying to work through some things? Or is that because it was thud and it wasn't full speed and there's that little switch you played? Yeah. When you're in thud in practice, it's a different switch that you have to have your finger on than if you're in full speed.
But I will say there's also, I mean, after you get in your butt kicked after a while, that switch should turn on for you. But I did think the defensive line was the most impressive group yesterday. I thought they clearly were I think they're clearly the group that has improved the most. And I think I said this last year too, but I really mean it this year. And I was thinking about this earlier because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because these are very fresh thoughts. But the defensive line, they lost some people in the transfer portal, but they didn't go out and they didn't replace the people that they lost in the transfer portal with more defensive linemen. So that tells me is they're very comfortable with the guys that they have. Yeah. And they're and the guys that they have they're very good. And you can see it yesterday. I think the most encouraging thing from this group is that the drop off. I think we did talk about this yesterday. The drop off from first string to second string, not significant at all. Not significant.
Well, and we saw that. And we saw that effect at the point of attack. To stay on the offense, it's important to understand where the defensive front is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We're having an organic conversation. We're going to do a defensive pod too. No, actually, I'm glad that you said that, because I think to understand what we saw from the offense, we have to understand and articulate what we also saw from the defense, because it's not a one-sided. Football's not a one-sided discussion.
Yeah.
Football's always a two-sided discussion. So I do think that that's important. I will agree that the offense was going up a defense that I thought when I watched practice a couple of times, and I thought when I watched Saturday, the defense is ahead of the offense in a lot of areas. Yeah, I think part of it is because there are more question marks on offense, like at running back. They have questions at running back. They're not fully settled there. They have huge questions behind Drake. They have very little depth on the offensive line that they're satisfied with. So a lot of the dominance we saw was when they went to the second team offense, because that offensive line, I mean, how many second teamers did we see yesterday they're going to play in games?
Yeah.
Ed Montilus didn't get, I don't know if he got any scrimmage reps. He got drill reps. Yeah. I don't know if he got any scrimmage reps. So outside of him, the starting offensive line was William Barnes, Willie Lampkin, the transfer from Coastal Carolina, Corey Gaynor, Jonathan Adorno, and Spencer Rowland. That's your starting five. Throw in Montilus. Those are the six offensive linemen they're comfortable with. After that, there's a big question mark. So a lot of what we saw was a second-team offense line really struggling more than the first team did. But the first team also had some issues as well. They were whipped quite a bit.
So earlier when I said when I was making that whole soliloquy about the defensive line, about how the drop off is lesser, it was it was evident during the one-on-one drills, because you're gonna do ones versus ones, and then you go twos versus twos, and once you got past the ones versus ones, it was pretty much defensive line just winning every single time, and it just wasn't close. And I mean, Mac Brown says they want to get the 8 offensive linemen for a season start. I don't know how close they are to that number.
I'll tell you how they do that. And he kind of hinted about it a little. Well, he didn't really hint about it. He was asked a question at the end of the press conference after the spring game. It was, what areas might you be interested in looking around for in the portal? And first thing he said was offensive line. I'm surprised he answered the question. I talked to the guy that asked the question about it. I said, I'm stunned he answered your question. But he did. So there are 4 position groups that they need depth. They need to fill. 3 of them are on offense. Offensive line's one of them, without a doubt. I think that's 1A. I think 1B is quarterback. Don't be surprised if they might look to see who's out there, who's got multiple years left, someone that they could bring in and they could serve as an apprentice under Drake for a year and take over in 24. Because if something happens to Drake, I don't think they have a great deal of confidence in Connor Harrell or Tad Hudson right now in going on the field and running the offense. And that's not a slight to those guys. It's just, this is a performance-based business. If you want to play big-time sports, you're going to be gauged totally on performance. And I don't think they're 100% ready yet. And I also think running back is another area where they will look as well, which is interesting because they moved DJ Jones to safety before spring practice because they thought they had enough guys over there. Well, Caleb Hood continues to be hurt. All right. George Pettaway's banged up, and he hasn't been on the pace I think that people expected. Then you've got British Brooks, who's coming off the terrible ACL injury. So you never know. There's a question mark there. So what you've got is Elijah Green, who was at the bottom of the depth chart in that room this time a year ago, and you've got Amari and Hampton. And they got Jordan Louis coming in, but he's going to be a true freshman. So I wouldn't be surprised if they lost somebody in that room, and I wouldn't be surprised if they replaced that person in that room with somebody a little bit more experienced that could challenge to be in one of the top 3 backs next fall. So let me ask you, since we're talking about this, what's more pressing? Getting someone in the running back room that could challenge for one of those top 3 spots, or getting another versatile offensive lineman that could play guard and tackle?
Offensive line. No if, ands, or buts about it. I don't, if anybody's watching this and you play running back or you used to play running back, don't take this offensive, but running backs are a dime a dozen. Somebody could just have a breakout year out of nowhere. Offensive line, Mac Brown said it yesterday, they're hard to find. Like, they don't grow in trees. There's not many people walking around at that size with that athleticism, smart enough to remember a whole play. But that's a hard package to come by. It's a hard package to come by. So it's like, obviously, offensive line, it's a more pressing. It's always going to be a more pressing need. Even if they had 8, I think you're always going to be looking for it. But yeah, I think they need to go I think going to the portal to get an offensive line is going to be of the utmost importance, because I do think they need more depth, because injuries happen, things happen in football, and you got a guy like Drake May back there. You can't have him vulnerable with a guy out there that's just not quite ready to play.
And they have a lot of safeties, so they can always move DJ Jones back to running back.
Yeah.
They can always move him back over there. Now, he struggled a little bit last year, but there are times when healthy, I thought he's looked pretty good at running back.
He's a capable body.
Maybe a spring away from it and learning another position might make him better going back to running back, but they do have a lot of safeties, and we'll talk about defense in the other pod. What about the backup quarterback? You were on the field watching Connor Harrell and Tad Hudson. I guess we could throw Jefferson Boaz in there. He's in the program for a few years. I offered my take on what I think the staff's take is, or my guess. I don't want people thinking that I got inside information on this. I do not. But I said what I said about backup QB. What are your thoughts?
Personally, I still like Connor Harrell. I think yesterday I was telling this to Jacob. yesterday he was under a lot of pressure a lot of the times because he just wasn't. I don't think he was adequately protected, and I think that actually goes for both quarterbacks, Drake May and Connor Harrell. They both were under a lot of pressure. They both are making a lot of passes outside the pocket, but Drake May obviously is Drake May, so he makes it look easy. But I don't know. I think someone once told me that quarterbacks are hard to evaluate because the most important thing is their brain, and you can't evaluate their brain just watching their high school tape. And Connor Harrell was a valedictorian of this class, so I'm a real believer that and he has accuracy. I just think yesterday was a bad performance, but I also don't put a ton of stock into spring practice performance because we've seen it in the past where.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm using what Mac has said in pressers when talking to us. Connor had a really good spring last year, but he didn't have a great fall. He didn't have a very good fall. And I think he was a little rocky to start this spring. That's one of the reasons why he was competing with Tad Hudson as long as he was for QB2. To me, Tad's a nice prospect, but a guy like Connor, with his track record in high school, having been in the program as long as he was, it shouldn't even really been much of a competition for QB2. I would have thought that in fact, I never considered the fact that there was a competition until Chip Lindsey told us a few weeks ago. I was like, oh, and then I wrote a story about it. Hey, there's a competition at quarterback. And then 5 days later, Max says, Connor had a great scrimmage. Connor had a great practice. He's QB2. I don't know how much he won it as much as just he's just the guy. And I think Tad's got a little bit more room to go. So I don't mean to sound really down on the quarterback situation outside of Drake, but I do think it's a concern. And one of the things this program is building itself on is that you got to have a big time prolific quarterback for this club to have a chance to win. Yeah. And they had Sam for 3 years, and ultimately they got an Orange Bowl and an 8-4. They didn't win more than 8. They had Drake for a year. They won 9, but they lost their last 4. And a lot of those wins were narrow wins. So they've had the 2 most prolific quarterbacks in program history, and they haven't taken a huge step forward. So the program is still growing. It's going to take a while for all the parts to come into place, but you need that quarterback there. That quarterback is the bait for everything else, and you need that quarterback there. So it is vitally important. And Mac has said this a couple of times publicly that they not only find the backup for this year, but they find the guy that could be 2024 starter because Drake's not going to be around. So I think going in the portal, finding someone, let it known, maybe that's why he said what he did Saturday, that they're looking for someone to back up Drake, and you never know when you're thrust into duty, and then to be the guy afterward in a system, even though Chip Lindsey's is different than Phil's, there are a lot of similarities. And there's a culture of moving the ball and throwing the ball and racking up numbers and stats and stuff. I think that a lot of quarterbacks out there would be very interested in North Carolina if they know there's a spot there.
Yeah, and to your point, the drop off from Drake May to Connor. This is not a knock on Connor Harrell. I mean, I think this would apply to most quarterbacks. There is a significant drop off from Drake May to Connor Harrell. So if the program decided that they wanted to go get a quarterback who's it's still going to be a drop off from whoever they go get from Drake May, but if they want to be a slightly less drop off, I completely understand why they would take that route.
Unless Caleb Williams wants to transfer to Carolina and sit behind Drake for a year. He can hold the hardware and show Drake what the hardware looks like, so Drake can prepare
as a backup quarterback. Then he's
10 months, yeah. That's a good point. And I think part of it is judging any quarterback that comes in now after seeing Sam for 3 years and Drake for a year. Maybe that's just not fair. Maybe we're not being fair to Connor. Maybe we weren't fair to Jacoby. Maybe we're not being fair to Tad. And if that's so, I can accept that. But however, hearing Max said what he said tells me that there's a lot of concern.
Yeah.
There's concern at offensive line. They have 6. And one of them was recruited by Mac. Jonathan Adorno is the only offensive lineman that's come in the Mac era that has elevated himself to a point where he could play starter snaps. Caden Baker, I think, was on that track, but he got banged up and retired. He's not playing football anymore. But a lot of the other ones, they've moved on and they haven't materialized. And we've got people are wondering, hey, when are they going to mention Zach Rice's name? Well, Zach's still in that next group. He hasn't crossed the threshold into that upper echelon. He's not there yet. And they had 3 offensive line coaches in 10 months. I think that's part of the problem. So now there's some, maybe with Randy Clements, there's some consistency there. He'll stick around. He's a Chip Lindsey guy. And perhaps now they can build some offensive linemen. But, Stacey Searles, I think he did a solid job with the experienced guys he inherited. But I would say development hasn't been that great. And again, it's not really a criticism. This is a results-oriented business. Where are those offensive linemen? Right now, if you look at the top 6, Rowland, he's a transfer, and this is his last year. Gaynor, transfer. This is his last year. Lampkin, transfer, but he's got 2 years. Barnes, Fedora recruit. This is his last year. Montilus, Fedora recruit. This is his last year. And then you got Adorno, who's a junior. That's it. And then if you look at the second team group, where is Zach Rice going to be in 8 months from now when next season ends? I think Eli Sutton has made some progress. Trevion Green is someone they really like, but he's had trouble staying healthy. So you got to be healthy, right? I think they actually like Chance Carroll as a backup center, although when Lampkin's healthy, he's got basically a hoof right there. When he's healthy, I think he'd be the backup center. Don't be surprised if Carroll gets on scholarship, by the way. That would not surprise me. So, and then they had part of their second team offensive line Saturday. They had a couple true freshmen at guard, RJ Grigsby and DJ Geth, Ed Geth's son. So I think they have some needs there. So running back, quarterback, and offensive line, it's good at the top to a degree, and then there's a drop off. Wide receiver, man, Carolina fans are going. I mean, it's dangerous. It's dangerous praising Tez Walker as much as I have, because I'm just going to set the guy up for failure, right?
Yeah.
But Brandon, just look at him. You were down on the field. He's a different guy.
I haven't said this publicly yet, but I think, and when I say this, I don't mean production, with the stats that they put up or anything, but I think if you were a GM of a team and you just had every wide receiver that Mac Brown has had in his second stint in Chapel Hill, since he's come back to Chapel Hill, you had every wide receiver he's had, and you lined them up on the field and they were running drills and it was a combine setting, I think Montez Walker would be the clear best one out of everybody. He would be the most talented one out of everyone. He would be one of the biggest, the fast. Well, maybe Andre Green Jr. I don't know. But I think
he's still in his process. The difference is Tez Walker has been through it. His process was at Kent State.
Yeah.
And now he's shooting out of that process and continuing to blossom, right? Yeah. Andre Green is still knee deep in his process.
Yeah.
I think the potential is there.
You can see it.
I think you can see it, and he's had some good moments this spring. It didn't really pop Saturday, but that's okay. I think the next 4 months this summer is going to be incredibly important for him.
For sure.
The work that he gets in with the quarterbacks, with Drake, he needs confidence. You could be the most athletic guy in the world, and you can have all the natural gifts to be the greatest whatever in the world. But if mind and body are not in sync, then it's not happening. But Tez Walker, the mind and the body are in sync. He is an absolute pleasure to watch. And so is Nate McCollum. Nate McCollum he's a slot who could play wide out. And he's a guy, and so could Kobe Paysour, by the way. I think that they've got a first 3, Walker, Paysour, and McCollum, that is really good. These are guys that can run a lot of different routes. They're interchangeable. Kobe has worked a ton at wide out this spring. He was the replacement for Josh at slot last year. He played 3 games for Josh Downs, and he was highly productive in all 3 of those games. But he's learned wide out, because if you've got those 3, you got to get him on the field. Just because one guy's a slot and the other guy's a slot, well, we can't put him out there because he's a slot. We can only put one slot on the field. Learn wide out, play.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're going to see. So I think they're going to be faster at receiver. I think they're going to be shiftier. I think they're going to have more big gains on underneath routes, because I think there's going to be a lot of catch and run potential with this group. And they've got a guy that can take the top off the defense. Tez Walker is a go down the sideline and just rip the defensive coverage apart, get free, catch the ball, and waltz into the end zone. He's that kind of guy. And I think we're going to see that a lot this year.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Tez Walker and Nate McCollum, do you think they're going to play as many snaps as, let's say, Antoine Green and Josh Downs did when they were healthy, obviously? Or do you think they're going to play less snaps because of the depth of the room? They can guys like Gavin Blackwell and J.J. Jones when he gets healthy. Do you think they're going to be rotating in and out, or do you think it's going to be kind of like the last few years where eventually they just settle in on the guys they like and they just stay out there?
Coaches want to win, and coaches are inherently paranoid, so they eventually just play the guys that they trust 1,000% instead of the guys they trust 600%. That being said, the goal, and they have talked about this very openly, is six guys, and they're going to run those six through. J.J. Jones, I didn't mention him in the first three, and he started last year. Now, he missed this spring, so he's got a lot of catching up to do. Gavin Blackwell, who came in very highly touted, hasn't quite gotten there yet. I think that he's made progress this spring. We saw him catch a ball in the spring game where he actually ran a nice little route. This is stuff that we haven't seen a whole lot before. And Andre Green, of course, is an X factor because he's capable of being a Roman candle at some point. Yeah. So when does that flicker occur and that flame go up? I think it's there. The staff, I'm sure, is waiting for it, but they're also trying to do things to ignite that themselves. That's why I said, again, this summer is going to be enormously important for him. I think if that's the six, you could play your reserves. Now, there's still some guys that could work their way in if Blackwell struggles, if he doesn't develop, if Andre Green, if that switch never occurs. I think Paul Billups and Christian Hamilton had good springs. I agree. And watching them out there Saturday, and I also watched them at practice, they look comfortable, confident, comfortable. They don't look like they just showed up a few months ago. So I do think the future is pretty solid there. Still trying to see Doc Chapman's strengths in practice. Haven't seen a whole lot of him, so I really can't comment. I know that he's someone that came in they thought would have a chance to get by defenses and maybe even do some slot stuff, but I don't know. I think right now they have six and they want six. I'm not sure they have six yet. I think they're trying to nudge Andre Green into that six. Basically, what they're basically saying is, we're not just going to take the top six. They have a standard for the top six. So if only four guys meet that standard, then the top six includes just four players. So I think that's a good way of doing it. So there's no satisfaction beyond the sixth guy. No, you're the sixth guy, but your bar is here and you're right here. You got room to grow. I think Andre Green is in that group right now. I think Gavin Blackwell's teetering on that line right there as well. So they both need to pick it up and get into that top six. And then if they do have six that they're very comfortable with, I think you'll see them rotate. They have to rotate, especially if they're running Walker down the sideline 15 times a game. I mean, you got to have some other people out there, and you got to have those guys rested.
Yeah, and then when you consider also, I said earlier, I don't know if the snaps for the receivers can go down. I don't think the stats are going to be as gaudy as they were for Josh Downs or anybody. Even though I think Montez Walker is a great player, I don't know if his stats will be that gaudy just because, you got mentioned the tight ends. You got Bryson Nez. Well, he's not playing this spring, but, they hope that he's going to take another step, and they obviously Kamari Morales and Copenhagen. So, yeah, it's going to be hard for those guys. It's going to be hard for those guys.
I think Walker catches 80 balls. McCollum caught 60 last year with three really less than mediocre quarterbacks at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think McCollum is going to be at 60 at Carolina. I think Tez Walker is going to go 80, and then we'll see what happens. I think Kobe Paysor can catch 60, 70, 80 passes. I really do. He caught 27, I think, last year and started 3 games and didn't do a whole lot in the other games. So I think he could be prolific as well. The tight end position, Mac said last year going into fall camp that of all the positions on the team, that was one he wasn't worried about. Well, guess what? Same guys are back. Yeah. And they had Julian Randolph in the summer. So again, I think this is a position of absolute strength. An area of emphasis for them this spring has been blocking, not just at the point of attack, but downfield. One of the things that the offensive staff has really worked on this spring, is doing a better job of blocking downfield, because you get to the second level, you want to get past that to the third level, then you can break it and score. And one of the ways guys can break long runs is if there's good blocking downfield. There have been times where Carolina's had excellent blocking wide receivers. There are times where the blocking of the wide receivers hasn't been that good. This is a bit of a younger group other than McCollum and Walker at wide receiver. So the other guys, they really have been, ratcheting up the blocking downfield, but that includes the tight ends. Because some of the tight ends, they run receiver routes and they're downfield as well. And that was not an area of strength, like with Bryson Nesbitt, for all the things he could do catching the ball. Blocking downfield and blocking at the point of attack was not a strength. So we know what they can do as receivers, but do they help the downhill running game at the point of attack? And are they better blockers downfield, either with, wide passes to the receivers or when the running backs get to the second level? I think those are going to be things that we won't know until probably the third or fourth game. And given who they open up against, I think we'll know everything we need to know about this team by the time they play Pittsburgh. You got South Carolina neutral site, App State at home, Minnesota at home, and at Pittsburgh. So we're going to know it. But when they have that open date, we're going to sit down to a podcast. We say, we know everything about the Tar Heels. And you're going to say, AJ, do you think the wide receivers and tight ends are blocking better downfield? And I'm going to say yes or no. And then I'm going to ask you, Brandon, do you think the tight ends are doing a better job blocking at the point of attack? Well, let's go and look at their 3rd and 1 conversion rate. Let's look at what they are running the ball. If they have first down inside the 10 in the red zone, how often have they run the ball to advance the ball and score? And the tight ends are a part of that. Those are things we won't know until we get 4 games in.
It's hard to tell. That's hard to tell the spring practice.
So overall, did you notice anything different about Chip Lindsey's offense other than 2 quick things that I'm going to say? One, I actually did notice during the scrimmage, they're setting in the plays a little bit differently. I didn't know to pay attention to that, but I have known about the difference in cadence. And I did see some differences there with cadence. And that some of the guys have said that been a little bit of a struggle because last year they just went the clap. Drake's clap, they basically went and the play started. You and I go back long enough in time where there were full cadences, all kinds of stuff barked out. Now they don't do as much of that, but there is a little bit of cadence now, and there's a little different timing for different snap counts, if you will. I have to use that in quotations because it's different now than it used to be. It's changed a lot. In fact, Larry Fedora's team, when Mitch Trubisky was quarterback, they went on a silent snap count the whole year. Silent snap count the whole year. So that's not the case now. But other than that, did you notice anything?
I mean, other than that, honestly, the offense is obviously
the running.
It's very, I was going to say running the ball. That's the only thing I really noticed that was different. It's a very similar offense. They still get to the ball very fast after each snap. The philosophy didn't change. I think the only thing that changed is the person that's calling the plays, honestly.
I think that the objective is to actually be faster to not getting the ball, but snapping when they get there, because they're going to have Drake call a lot of the plays. They're going to signal the plays into Drake. And as he's moving up after the play ends, he's then barking out whatever signal he can to his teammates. Instead of, one of the things I know fans hate is when a team will rush up the field after a 20-yard gain, they get to the line of scrimmage, and then they're all looking over at the coaching staff for 45 minutes. Because they got 9 guys doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
Here, stuff's going to be signaled to Drake. Drake's going to get to them. It's not always going to be that way, but it's going to be that way enough that I can see this team getting to the line of scrimmage and having quick snap counts when they get there, instead of a lot of burn time in between. Now, we didn't really see that yesterday so much, but I guess we'll have to wait because crazy, but they didn't want to put stuff on film.
Yeah, and if that's the case, I think that will help the offensive linemen, especially with the run blocking, because if you're out there playing and you're going fast, defensive linemen are going to start getting tired, and all of a sudden you're firing off the ball and they're not giving you nearly as much pushback, and then you can get things rolling. So if that's the case, I think that's a good thing. I think they'll ultimately be a good thing for their running game.
Well, and go back to your question about the depth of wide receiver. If you're going to go that fast, you got to have depth so you don't wear down. And we're going to go back to depth at the offensive line. Those guys get tired too.
Yeah.
So if you're going fast, your linemen they've got to get to a point where they could sub out, not just for a couple snaps. You want to sub out a whole series. So let's say with Adorno, Lampkin, and Montilus, they could each split the reps at guard and stay fresh. But what about at center with Gaynor? I know that Gaynor won't want to come off the field. He's Joe Football as much as you could possibly be Joe Football. But at tackle, you got to sub out some. Plus, you have to get guys ready for next year. If Eli Sutton, if you project him as your starting right tackle in 2024, you've got to get him some meaningful reps in 2023. And doing that early in the year when it's hot, it's going to be hot as blazes in South Carolina and Charlotte on September 2nd. So get him out there for a couple series. If you could save 8 to 12 reps for one of your starters, he's a little bit fresher at the end of the game.
Yeah. And I always go back to the Notre Dame game. I believe they had 2 offensive linemen out that game when UNC played Notre Dame. And there was absolutely you couldn't tell whatsoever. There was no drop off whatsoever. They still dominated the line of scrimmage. And I think Carolina is just a ways away from that. It's just the drop off is just too significant now. And it was clear. It was clear during the drills. It was clear during the scrimmage. I think that's absolutely the place where they need to improve the most. And I think going into the portal, like you said earlier, is the only way to really fix it at this point.
You prompted a question in my mind, and I think you just kind of answered it. It was, that of all the position groups, if you were going to evaluate them all and say, okay, what is the position group that would most hold them back from contending for something significant nationally or even within the ACC?
Oh, for sure.
I think it starts with the offensive line.
For sure. 100%. 100%. If you line Carolina's offense up with Georgia's defense, the biggest mismatch is going to be right there at the line of scrimmage. And I know Georgia is the best defense out there. But what I'm saying is that's the thing that's keeping. I think I wrote about this recently, but that's the thing that's keeping them away from being at that level where they can compete at that national level.
I will close this with saying this. Now, I don't have intimate knowledge of every active tempering that is going on with Carolina football, with other schools coming in trying to poach, but there's been a lot of poaching. And I'd be willing to bet you that there has been less attempts at poaching the offensive line than the other position groups. And again, I'm not being a jerk here. It's just the reality of it. And I actually think that they could be okay on the offensive line. We're hearing really good things about Spencer Rowland, and he's a guy that never had a full off season in real college football, if you will, because in the Ivy League, they don't have the offseason program that they have at North Carolina. So he's going through his first one. He's got wonderful leverage. I was told by somebody inside the program who's very much in the know. They think that he actually could be an NFL prospect. Okay. William Barnes was a Rivals top 100 guy when he came. And Montilus was a top 150 guy. Corey Gaynor was he was a 3-star coming out of high school, but he was a highly touted 3-star, went to Miami, started 28 games at Miami. All right. So there's talent there. And there's some good players there. I think Adorno's a nice player. Lampkin was the Sun Belt Conference Offensive Lineman of the Year. That's not shabby. So I do think that there's potential that this could be a solid group, especially with Randy Clements, who he's a guy that chews glass for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's what they've needed more of up front. They needed more physicality and better footwork. And if you watch the drills they do in practice, man, it's all about balance. It's all about footwork and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's an area they've lacked. You watch the pass protection the last couple of years, the footwork was not good. So maybe we're going to do a defensive pod next, and we're going to talk about some of these same things from the defensive side. Maybe if you want to be a glasses half full guy for the Carolina fans that are paying attention here, maybe it was the defense that was so good and we didn't really get a good handle of the offense, because it's like if you're going to play one-on-one against Michael Jordan, you're not going to look that good, but you might be able to beat the next 100 guys in line, right?
Yeah. First of all, I agree with your point you made.
That's wishful thinking for Carolina fans.
It's very wishful, but I agree with the point that you make that this is a very solid group. And I think me and you had this conversation a little while ago. We were talking about how Carolina's offensive line, they're good enough for 90% of college football. They're good enough for, most teams out there. They're good enough to handle most teams out there. But when you get to that top level where they want to go, when you want to get the double-digit wins, offensive line is the main group that needs to take the next step.
And what if I told you all along when you first came on board about how I judge the teams I cover? What did I say?
based on what they tell you.
Based on
Realistically,
what what their stated mission is and what they say about it. Yeah. So that's the thing. We're talking about the offensive line, not as if this is coming off the Fedora era, 5 wins in 2 years. We're talking about an offensive line in a team that played in the ACC title game last year, went to the Orange Bowl a couple of years ago. They're saying one of their mantras is 9 is not enough. A slogan, 9 is not enough. 9 wins is not enough. So if you want to satisfy Mac's mission of getting them back to where they were in 96 and 97, it's the offensive line right now that I think is the weakest link in that effort. If you're satisfied with 7 or 8 wins, then the offensive line is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine. But I think the mission is much greater. You don't bring in Ted Monachino and Clyde Christensen if you're satisfied with 8 and 9 wins. You bring in guys like that. You bring in Freddie Kitchens as your tight end coach if you are intent on winning 11, 12, 13 games. Mac's intent on doing that. So there are parts of the program, I think, that have entered into that realm as far as position groups go. This one hasn't. This one hasn't, based on potential and based on performance. Now, the potential might be more than we realize. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe Randy Clements can extract more out of him than Jack Bicknell was able to, which was not a successful stint at all. And then Stacey Searles was able to. So we'll see. So so we're not dogging them just in the general sense. We're gauging everything as if the mission this year is 11 or 12 wins. And it's probably going to take that for Drake to win a Heisman as well. Very quickly.
Can he win a Heisman? Very high.
Can he win a Heisman? We're talking offense. Can he win a Heisman?
Absolutely. I think, yeah. He should. I think he should have been. Should have been in New York last year.
I think they're 9-1. I get in my car when I'm leaving Winston-Salem after the Wake Forest game because they kick us out of the press box so early there, which is ridiculous. Yeah. And that's one of my beefs. Wait, you should let us finish our work instead of an hour after the press conferences are over. And I get in my car, turn on, and Drake's on ESPN radio doing an interview. He was exploding at that point. They're 9-1. He's racking up stats, and then the offense just kind of fell over a cliff. And I have my theory on why, and I'm not going to say it here in a podcast, but I have put it on our boards, our premium message board, which is you can access it for just $8.33 a month, and you'll know exactly what I said about why I think that happened. I'm not going to say it here, though, because I don't think it'd be fair. Now, the offense, Drake wasn't great that point on, and the offense wasn't great that point on, and they lost. Had they continued that pace and taken care of Georgia Tech and then taken care of NC State and then gone into the Clemson game 11-1, I think Drake would have had him. He would have been in New York. I think he would have been much closer. So if they win 11 regular season games, I think that he's got a chance, but I think they've got to probably win 11, especially with the league being what it is. And they have a road game at Clemson. Even if they lose, he's got to go 350 with 3 TDs and no picks in a game like that.
See, the reason I believe he can win is because, like you said, it does. I agree with you. It does come down to winning. But if they win that many games, I think he's going to have so many Heisman moments, so many marketable Heisman moments, because that's the only way they're going to. I mean, that's the only way I see them getting to that point. So if they win that many games, I think he'll definitely be in New York, probably one of the favorites to win it.
He's got to shred Minnesota. Yeah. And then Minnesota's got to go into Big Ten play and be pretty solid defensively. Those are some of the things that have to happen. We're going to do Drake pods when we get into the off season, because we're actually going to do, starting in May, we're going to do a daily drop at 11 a.m. during the week anyway. At least Monday through Thursday. We might do Fridays as well. So stay tuned for that. We're going to hit on specific little topics like that. Just have some fun with it. Brandon will be involved. Jacob will be involved. David, Dean, and myself. We may even bring Trey on for a few pods. So we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to roll those throughout the entire summer leading into fall camp. And if they do well, we might continue to do them after that. So this will be one of our topics for sure. For Brandon Peay, I'm Andrew Jones. We have been discussing Carolina's offense for this spring football. It's now over with, 15 practices in the books. Make sure you come back and check out our defensive one. And there's a bunch of other stuff on our channel, guys. Jacob had a really good video from the highlights from the spring game and a lot of other stuff, a lot of podcasts, and we are all over basketball portal stuff. So if that's your thing too, make sure you check us out. And there's a reminder, for just $8.33 a month, you can be an insider too. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.